Your starting position in this race will be decided by the answers to questions that we are going to be asking you.
Sorry, what?
If English is your parents' first language, take a step forward.
Oh, yeah.
If you have ever been the only person in the room of your race, take a step backwards.
It's kind of frustrating that, like, me and Sarah are just standing at the back here while the majority of people who may be white are, like, standing right at the front. That just frustrates me a bit, because it's almost as in what society is today. I don't want this to be how it is, but it is, so it just gets a bit frustrating.
Well, if you're anything like me, you found that pretty hard to watch. Horrifying, in fact. You know, let's make no bones about this. What you have just witnessed is primary school children in England being divided along racial lines. You know, I used to think that saying no to racism meant getting beyond our historical and centuries-old fixation with race. I thought it meant forgetting about race. I didn't think that it meant spending every waking second talking about nothing but bloody skin colour and obsessing with terrible injustices, like this, for example.
First, white privilege provides white people with perks. Some perks go unnoticed, like being able to actually use complimentary shampoo and conditioner at a hotel.
Hey, I get it. I, of all people, understand the terrible trauma of not having your preferred shampoo on hand. But, I mean, come on. Now, some may argue that it's important to teach our kids that racism is wrong, and that may be true. But maybe when it comes to kids and racism, we should stick with the classics, like this.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
Anyway, this is all important because critical race theory isn't just being foisted on kids in dreary British documentaries. It's happening to our kids in Australian schools. And in this weekend's edition of the Spectator Australia, the IPA's Dr. Bella de Brera lays out the horrifying details of her research into the matter. Let's hear from her now. Well, now we welcome back to CounterCulture from the Institute of Public Affairs, Dr. Bella de Brera. Congratulations on being our first returning guest to CounterCulture.
Thank you, I'm delighted. I don't know what I did to be here, but something right, obviously.
Well, you talk about the things, the things that matter. So let's get right into it. Anti-racism training for kids. Now, what are primary age children learning about anti-racism right now in Australian schools?
Well, this is New South Wales, to specify where it is. But it's actually kindergarten children as well. It's not really,
kindergarten.
They're starting at 3 and 4 year olds because
you're joking.
I wish I was joking, but unfortunately, this is the reality of our education system. So at the moment, they're giving 3 and 4 year olds an introduction to anti-prejudice training. They're not really talking about racism at this point. They're getting into this idea of difference. And they're using subtle techniques. They're talking about understanding difference and understanding, you know, why you're different to the little person that you're playing with next door.
Yeah.
And they're using things like Dr. Seuss's The Sneetches, which is quite funny because, you know, this is now banned material. Yeah, correct. So they're going to have to get onto that and
I thought Dr. Seuss is racist now. They're using it for anti-racism training.
Yes. No. So they're going to have to take that off the agenda pretty quickly.
Yeah. Go to something wholesome and family-oriented like Cardi B videos or something. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Well, there would be people who would say, what's wrong with getting kids from an early age not to be prejudiced? But from what you've written for the Spectator Australia, that's just an entree into the next course, which is for getting deeper into primary school. What does that look like?
Yeah, so they work their way up quite subtly. They're very clever about this. This is not talking immediately to 3-year-olds about racial privilege and white privilege. No. So by the time they get sort of 10 years old, they're starting to teach them about how to recognize racism.
Right.
And they're introducing them to the idea of racism being a problem in their school, in their classroom. It's becoming more personalized, you know.
Right.
Perhaps you're a racist and you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that they're getting. So that, you know, look at the teacher's notes and you look at the classroom activities.
Primary school kids are already being told you may be a latent racist and not even know about it.
Yes, this is when they're 10.
So they're already imparting this original sin of whiteness.
Yes.
So what does then happen when high school arrives?
Yeah, well, so they get to 13 or 14. So between 13 and 16, they're getting lessons on institutional racism. So they've already told them that there's a problem with their own race. Yeah. And now they're telling them that there's a more general problem, which is the problem of institutions in Australia. They're saying that our political, our governmental, our healthcare is all institutionally racist.
Right. Okay.
And they're telling us that there's a problem with the Australian flag. So one of the classroom activities I said, have a look at the emblems on the flag, and do you think this is still relevant for Australia in 2021? So there's all these questions that they're obviously leading questions. And you can imagine the scene in the classroom where you get this social justice warrior teacher leading
and students have been primed for it as well.
Children have been primed from it since kindergarten.
There is a clear trajectory here. Again, you can say, okay, teach kids not to be prejudiced and mean to each other. That's fair enough.
Yeah,
that's part and parcel of kindergarten education.
Yeah.
But it's this recurring theme. So by around primary school, they start being taught to basically hate themselves.
Yeah.
And towards the end, it's hating their country. This is frightening.
Well, yes, and then later on, then you get the whole critical race theory unleashed on the sort of the older students, which is even worse.
Yeah.
So I think we need to talk about it because it's insidious, and this is imported straight out of America. America is just totally obsessed with race at the moment, and critical race theory is now the dominant ideology in schools there.
Yeah.
So I think we need to worry about it, and we need to start looking at it, and we need to start calling out the Department of Education for having this in the curriculum.
And it's not just that it's silly or that it's a little bit objectionable. I mean, we do not want to reach a stage in Australia where you have marauding gangs going around burning down Starbucks and so on. We do not want that here. But this is, as you said, this is how it starts.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the logical conclusion. This is where this goes. So critical race theory is a rehash of the Marxian dichotomy of bourgeois versus proletariat. They've just made it white versus black. That is so wrong, and that is so dangerous.
Yeah, and it's not making us any more harmonious as a society. It's not making us any happier. It's not doing anything to advance the cause of, say, Aboriginal disadvantage.
No.
None of this is helping anybody with anything. So why do we persist with it?
There's an element of a utopianism about it. As there is with all these ideologies that come out of the left, this realization that there is inequality. How do we fix that? We fix that by telling all white people that they are the problem.
Yeah.
And we fix that by saying, well, then our institutions are the problem because they're racist.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there's no vision. There's no vision for post-destruction of these institutions.
No, it's just wholly nihilistic.
It's wholly nihilistic.
Yeah.
With no vision, as I said, and you have to have this blind belief in what comes next, even though they haven't actually told us what comes next.
No.
And I think we need to worry about it as Australians, that this is something that is being imposed on children from such a young age, and they're malleable. Yeah. They believe everything the teachers are telling them.
And we don't have any conservatives in politics actually calling this out either. That's the other problem here, that so-called conservatives have completely vacated the field. It's a little bit about like safe schools. Safe schools was a little bit loopy, but nobody wanted to say anything about that because how can you be against a safe school? Well, how can you be against anti-racism?
Everybody's against anti-racism.
Yeah.
And this is the problem.
Everyone's against racism.
Sorry, everyone's against racism, but this is the problem with the conservative right side of politics is that we've long abandoned the idea of culture wars and just handed it to the left.
Because nobody wants to pick the fight.
Nobody wants to pick the fight. And the language that the left uses, as you say, is very clever because who's going to say, no, we need more racism? Yeah. The other problem with the idea of white privilege is that as soon as you start arguing with the idea of white privilege, they say, that's evidence that you've got. That's evidence of your white privilege. Yeah. So it's a circular
argument. That's white fragility.
That you can never win. That's white fragility.
So you touched briefly on the US and the fact that that might be coming attractions for what we're seeing in Australia. And I understand in Anchorage there was some sort of issue as well in Alaska.
There's a new diversity officer that works for the education department. He's come up with a list of books that parents should be reading to their children. One of them is obviously White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo, which just appears everywhere.
Some sociology book.
Well, no, I mean, this is the foundation of the problem.
I guess it's the Bible.
This is the Bible of
critical race theory.
Exactly. But they've also come up with this book called Anti-Racist Baby.
Oh, yeah. I know about Anti-Racist Baby.
Which is for newborns.
Yeah.
Parents are meant to be reading this stuff to their newborns. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the next thing that comes here. So it's from the inception, from the very minute.
From cradle to grave.
From cradle to grave.
Racial grievance, either being an oppressor or oppressed. What's this doing to our society? How can you run a cohesive society with racial divisions taught from childbirth onwards?
Well, you can't. And this is why we need to push back against it. Yeah. And Australia is a wonderful country in terms it does not have these racial divisions. And my beef with this is that they're creating these divisions where there are none. And if you know anything about the foundation of Australia and the institutions that were founded on, which are the universal institutions of equality before the law, equality of women and men, they don't discriminate on the basis of race.
No.
And these things are never mentioned to the children.
You know, this is what I often say. Western civilization did not invent slavery, but it ended slavery. Western civilization did not invent racism, but it did end racism or bring us to an understanding of genuine racial equality. Western civilization did not invent misogyny, but it did advance the cause of women's equality. What are we losing by turning our back on the principles of liberalism, on, frankly, the Bible, and on those sort of cultural lessons? What have we shoved out of the curriculum to bring in this, you know, anti-racism craziness?
We're shoving out what makes us society cohesive and stable, and we're inviting in anarchy and instability and division. There are no benefits to this whatsoever. It's a totally negative philosophy, critical race theory. So I'm sorry to bring the viewers down on a low note, but we need to talk about this.
Look, there is room for optimism in all of this because parents have been fighting back. I mean, there was a school in Warrnambool recently where they did push back against some of the craziness of this identity politics.
Yeah, look, this is not the race, this is the gender, this is the other aspect of identity politics. So that these 13-year-olds were made to stand up in an assembly and apologise to all the girls for crimes they hadn't committed. Horrific crimes of rape, and went home and said to the parents, "I'm not a racist." And the backlash was just a tsunami of backlash, which really is very heartening. Because it does show that this critical race theory, this identity politics, this is not mainstream Australia.
No, it isn't mainstream Australia,
and it never will be.
And we can't conflate what Australia's political and cultural elite are doing with what mainstream Australian values are. And we should always have faith in Australia and the common sense of the people in it. And people will fight back. This will end, but we have to talk about it. We have to shine a light on it. We have to build a cat here. And on that note, well, thank you for the work you do here at the IPA and exposing this stuff. Well done on an excellent piece. Again, as always, in the Spectator Australia, and looking forward to inviting you on for your third appearance, a hat trick.
I can't wait. Thank you.